CBC News asked Abu Huzaifa about his admission. He now says he made it all up. So why did he admit to the killings in the first place? And why would he change his story now? Joining me from New York via Skype is Rukmini Callimachi. She is a foreign correspondent with the New York Times, and she's also the reporter behind the New York Times podcast Caliphate. Hi, Ms. Callimachi. Nice to see you.
Thanks for having me, Vassy.
So I've listened to all the chapters of this podcast that have been released so far, and I think what's really struck me is how it sometimes it almost feels unreal or surreal. And I'm wondering, what is it about this man that makes you believe his story?
So let me be very clear. In Chapter 6, which was released to subscribers yesterday, we delved into the rigorous fact-checking process that the New York Times undertook to try to verify elements of his story. And we've been able to verify, I would say, the scaffolding of what he says, but there are still holes in what he says, and we have identified those holes for listeners. The reason I find him interesting is we got to this man in November of 2016. That's almost, I would say, like a year and a half ago. We interviewed him multiple times in the year year and a half that came, 3 times in person, several hours each time. And we also kept on interviewing him by other means, through telephone, etc. And we were able to get to him both before any other media had gotten to him, but crucially, before law enforcement had gotten to him. When we interviewed him in November of 2016, nobody from CSIS or RCMP had yet interviewed this man. They, in fact, came to his door 12 hours later, not even 12 hours after we left him. So he was speaking to us in this window of time when he essentially thought that he had slipped through the cracks. He had been back and forth between Pakistan and Canada. He'd been out of the Islamic State for more than a year. And so because he was able to go in and out of the airport, he was under the impression that he had made it through. And in his telling to us, he said that he felt remorseful for what he had done and that he was looking for closure. Everything changed after really the next day when he realized that he was under investigation. He became more and more anxious as we neared publication. At first, he asked us not to publish. I told him that we couldn't do that. And as we neared publication, he actually began to threaten us and to say, if you publish this, I'm just going to say that I made it up, which is what you saw basically last week.
Yeah, he not only said that he made it up, but he kind of accused you of trying to lure him in a way that opened the door for him to embellish. And he said that you told him that he was giving you a gift with his story. I'm just wondering if you can respond to that.
I do feel that he gave us a gift with the story. It's an eye-opening account of his passage through the Islamic State. If you listen to our interviews, I think you will see very clearly that there was never any entrapment. We made very clear to him who we were. We set the terms very clearly. And anyway, I think that we need to look carefully at what he's saying now through the lens that this is a young man that is now facing a real investigation and possibly arrest. And he is very scared of being arrested. And beyond that, he's also scared of having his identity be revealed and harm coming to his family as a result.
What about that concept of remorse that you brought up? At times, it's very convincing in the podcast that he is remorseful, but at other times, for example, when he's describing that execution, where it sounds very detached in almost without emotion. So I'm wondering, do you believe that he is remorseful?
He certainly gave the impression in, I would say, our first interview that he was. And again, that first interview was the only time that we spoke to him or that anybody spoke to him from the media before he was under investigation. A year and a half has passed since that time, and his tone has changed quite dramatically since then. I would say that his tone, I was speaking to him last night, his tone has become somewhat cocky at this point. I've told him this myself. I think that he thinks that because it's very difficult for Canada to get forensic proof of any of these crimes in Syria, I think he thinks that he slipped the net and that he's going to get off.
What's your reaction to that?
Look, I'm a reporter and I'm just here, like you, to relay the facts.
So do you think, though, based on your information and your conversations with him, that he poses a threat?
I'm not qualified to answer that question. Obviously, I sat with him over 3 different occasions, and these occasions were over a year apart. in those moments, I certainly felt no particular threat to my own safety. But this is an avowed member of a terrorist group. Anyway, and so I think it's for law enforcement really to make that determination, not for a reporter.
What do you think the importance of getting his story out there is?
Look, as somebody who's been on this beat now for 5 years or so, I think it's important that we listen to them. We have a habit of reporting on this group by talking to officials who have their own theories about what these people are doing. And I think that there is value in hearing the story from the perspective of the people who have joined, and especially when they are speaking as he was in nature, right? The other interviews that I and others have done with members of ISIS tend to be either when they're in jail, so there's an element of duress that is happening there, or when they are still inside the Islamic State, and there's an element of just overt propaganda. I found it interesting to hear from him that the acts of killing, as he describes them, and again, this is his account to me, that these were not easy for him to carry out. I think we assume that these guys are these bloodthirsty monsters. Think about the fact that there is a progression that occurs in order for somebody to end up in the situation where you take another human life.
Are there more surprises to come in future chapters?
Yes, there are.
Any hints?
I really can't go there.
Had to try.
Yes, of course.
Okay, thanks so much for your time, Ms. Kalamaki. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Take care.
Joining me with more news on this story is CBC News' investigative producer, Nazim Baksh. Hi, Mr. Baksh, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing? I'm okay.
Thanks for being with us. You've also interviewed this man. What have you learned?
Well, he met with RCMP yesterday. He confirmed that he did a polygraph test, a lie detector test, and that it proved inconclusive. And he basically doesn't understand or don't know why. He has no explanation for why it was inconclusive, but I suppose the question is not whether he went or not to join ISIS, but what he did when he was there.
Yeah, and so basically what the news of this that we're learning, as you point out, is that he's met with RCMP after this podcast came out, in which he described in great detail the killing of somebody. So obviously the RCMP has followed up since then.
Yes.
Okay, and what I wanted to get your reaction, of course, also to what Ms. Kalamaki was saying in that interview, especially the idea that he sort of feels like he might have gotten away with this because of how hard it is to prove these kinds of things, given that the evidence would exist elsewhere and not in Canada.
Well, she's right. I mean, he told her one version of a story that is quite remarkable, of killing people, great detail. That he went into, which to me is very, very difficult to make up. When we went to see him last week, Friday, face to face, because I wanted to sort of ask him, how come we repeatedly asked you what you did in Syria. We asked you what your role was. We asked you what your time, did you shoot anyone? Did you get close, were you involved in these kinds of beheadings and these notorious things that we'd seen video clips of? And he said categorically no, he was not involved in any of those things. He lashed a few people, he arrested a few people, he locked people up for smoking in public, which violated ISIS's rules. People who were freely mixing in the streets were arrested and so on and so forth, but nothing like what he told Ms. Kalamaki and the New York Times in this wonderful podcast. So we wanted to hear from him face to face, and he started sobbing and crying and saying that he made it up. He doesn't understand why he did so. He was under a lot of stress. He was taking self-medicating and drugs and things like that. And so, it was really a surprise. So as Ms. Kalamaki says in her interview with you, we are not police officers. We are journalists, and our job is to tell a story based on the presentable facts that we have and what people say to us. And he is the first person telling us what his experience was in his time with ISIS. So I think, the next chapter of this book, so to say, will be written by the RCMP and Canadian law enforcement agencies.
She says she has the impression that he's become cocky. Did you get the same impression after meeting with him?
Well, in my meeting with him, he wants the version of the story he told us to be the dominant version. And so he's not going to be cocky with us. He's going to try and be reassuring to us, try to be as convincing as he can, to placate us, maybe to assure us that what he said to us was the real story, and there's nothing else to what he has said. And that means he has killed no one. He even told us last Friday that he says, I will agree to a polygraph. And so we reported that online, that he had said that, and this week he actually went through with that promise and agreed to do it. And now he's saying, well, to Ms. Kalamaki in an email exchange or a WhatsApp exchange, he said, you know, she said to him, how is that possible that you're okay? I mean, that you were able to tell the story to the polygraph and nothing happened. And he said, don't know.
Oh boy. Lots more to come on this story, I'm sure. Thanks a lot, Nazim.
Take care.